In this forehand comparison, we're going to look at Matthew's forehand compared to Roger Federer. It's also important to understand that if I put up Djokovic or Nadal, the technique things you see with the pros are going to be virtually identical, especially with the men. I'm going to let this play through and we'll look at these things. But the first thing we're going to look at is the starting position. So if you look at Matthew here in the beginning and you look at Roger, it virtually looks the same. It's pretty identical at this point. You can see with the blue circle position that the technique is very similar. But after this point, things start to change a little bit. So what I see in Matthew's swing is that there's a hitch from this point forward that hurts him when he's on the run or when he's having to hit balls back that are really fast from his opponent. So what we'll see here is that Roger does something a little bit differently. He goes into what I call a power V position. So if you look at that yellow V there, you can see that from Roger's hand to his shoulder, it makes a V position right there, a V sign. Roger's right hand is at his shoulder height, and then the tip of Roger's racket is above his head with that green arrow position. If you look at Matthew, you can see that his right hand is not where it should be in that V position. He's already bringing the racket down. And then if you look at the green arrow position, you can see that his racket is not up. So again, this is where it starts. He's got this hitch where he kind of does half of a loop. He's not doing a full loop swing. And just moving forward from this position, we're going to look at the stretch shorten cycle itself, and that leads to more racket head speed vertically, gives you more power and more spin, and Matthew's missing this component a little bit. So we're going to let this play forward, and you can see what Roger does here. When Roger drops his racket will be tilted off to his right, kind of towards us, and that racket will be tilted in that position. And what you see with Matthew is you don't see that racket tilted in that position when he drops the racket. You can see his racket is basically pointed straight back. He has worked on this a little bit in the lesson, but I'd like to see him have that tilt off to the right. We're going to move forward and look at the contact here between both players, but watch at the contact point here. And what you see essentially with Roger is that his eyes are focused down at the ball in contact, and he's keeping his head relatively still. With Matthew, his eyes are not as focused on the ball at contact. I feel like when he hits the forehand, he tends to look forward a little bit more or more at the target, and you want to keep your eyes focused down at the ball so you're not giving away the destination of your shot. It's extremely important for disguise that you keep your eyes down at the contact when you're striking the ball. The last thing we're going to look at is the amount of shoulder rotation you want to get on your forehand. So we'll let Roger go through here, and what you'll see is that when Roger finishes that forehand, that he rotates and his chin is pretty much over his right shoulder. Matthew doesn't get that same amount of rotation of his upper body. It's a very slight difference between him and what Roger is doing here, but there is a difference in terms of the amount of rotation. So I would like to see Matthew rotate more on his forehand. So just as a review of the things Matthew needs to work on, he needs to get a solid V position with his hitting arm in the back of his swing, and he needs to make sure that that racket head is above his own head in the back of the swing. He also needs to make sure that when he comes out of his loop position that his racket is tilted more to the right to help activate that stretch shorten cycle to produce more racket head speed. The next thing he needs to focus on is to make sure that his eyes are down on the ball at contact to help assist with disguising his shot location. And the last thing Matthew needs to work on his forehand is to make sure that he rotates his shoulders more to help get more body rotation into the ball, which provides more power.